Hi, this is James from the trueSKY team, and today I'm going to show you tips and tricks to make your own scenes in Unreal Engine 5 with the help of two plugins. Dash for the ground and everything on it, and of course trueSKY for the clouds and sky you see above. For previous users of trueSKY, this video marks the release of trueSKY 4.4. To celebrate this release, our friends at Dash have a great promotion available. So anyway, let's get started. Here we have our base Unreal scene, a new level with no changes. First thing I'm going to do is delete the default floor so we can add our own terrain with the Dash plugin. If you don't see this button, it means you don't have the Dash plugin installed or enabled. I'll link a great video below on installing Dash along with some other tips and tricks. Opening up the Dash content browser, I can see all the assets I've downloaded on Megascans. I already have my textures and assets available for this video, but I will link them all below because they're all part of Quixel Bridge, which is included with Unreal Engine 5. Here's the texture I want for my environment. So I'm going to select it, and back in the Dash tool I'm going to type terrain, and the create terrain option will appear. Selecting this, we will now have our terrain, the material already added for us. This brings up the context menu for the terrain generator, which shows us all the different parameters which can quickly be adjusted. Here I am adjusting the scale, UV scale of the texture, and the turbulence within the terrain. For this scene, I just want a small terrain with some small hills. Now we want to scatter some foliage over the terrain. It's really simple. Just find your foliage within your Dash content browser. I have found some desert cotton for my scene. Hold Control and drag into the scene, and it'll bring up a separate context menu. Selecting scatter on selection or scatter here will work, but as I have the terrain selected, I do scatter on selection. And after a few seconds, you can see the cotton has been scattered all over the terrain. We can again have a separate context menu for the scatter, which we can adjust the different parameters such as the density and the scale. You can see within the scatter parameter that Dash has added all the different variations of the model to the scatter. You may have noticed the foliage looks dark and incorrect at a distance. This is a performance option within Unreal which can be adjusted with a simple console command. Hit the tilde key or go to the command line and type in foliage. We can see LOD distance scale. By default this is on 1. If we adjust this to 5 for example, we can see the issue is now resolved. Next I want to add some walls into my scene. I'm going to make these walls out of multiple rocks so I have full control on the shape and size of the wall. So opening up the content browser again, I already have a rock available and I'm going to drag it into the scene. Here we have some helpful tools for positioning and scaling our asset, but we don't really need these right now. Now the rock is in the scene, we can use the Dash toolbar to search for our scatter method. There are many multiple scatter methods we can use, but for a wall the best option will be a grid scatter. In the context menu, we can add the rock we have placed as the grid origin and the mesh that we want to scatter. In doing so, we now have a grid of rocks. But we need to make this grid into a wall. So to make this grid into a wall, we need to adjust some of the parameters. We want the rocks to be closer together by reducing the width, but increasing the number of divisions for both width, depth and height. But this could be adjusted to your liking. Now this wall looks okay, but it's quite easy to notice the repetition and the fact it's made of a single asset. To remove this though, we can simply hit the random spin option, and immediately there's a massive improvement to visuals. We can also increase the scale slightly to make sure the rocks blend in together. Now I made a small mistake here, as I deleted the origin mesh, which meant the origin reset to the world center. So what you should do is hide the origin mesh so editing is much simpler. But if your scatter origin is at the center of your scene, it's because your scatter does not have an origin, so do be aware of that. But here I am just repositioning the walls for the scene. We can always go back to the Dash toolbar and bring back the scatter settings if you want your walls to be a different shape or size. Now I am happy with the wall placement. I want to add a path between them. To do this we want to use the draw curve tool. This tool is great as I can just draw directly onto my scene. So I select draw curve and draw a path for my scene. Simple as that. Then we want to scatter an asset along the curve. So I have a ground asset I've already found. I'm going to add this to the scene. Now we're going to use a different scatter tool for this path, and that is the path scatter. So I select path scatter from the dash toolbar, and here I can select our curve as the curve we will scatter along, and the asset will be what we are scattering. And then just like that, we've got the start of a path. Quickly adjusting the density, and our path is almost complete. Adding some random spin will help break up repetition, and a small amount of sync will drop the path into the ground so it blends nicely. Reorganizing the scene and re-enabling our grass, you can see our scene is slowly starting to take shape. But there is a problem, as the grass is overlapping with the path. This is actually an easy fix though. What we can do is select the cotton and add the curve as a proximity mask. We can adjust the distance slightly and we can see there is no longer grass on or around this curve. You could inverse this setting so you only have cotton alongside the path, but for now we want no foliage on a dirt curve. Our scene needs a camera, so if we type camera into the dash toolbar and then select the create camera option, we will now have a camera, and this will bring up a new context menu with different settings to adjust, such as the focal length or the aperture. Next I'm going to add some cactuses or cacti behind the walls in the scene, but I only want them in a certain area. So again I'm going to use the draw curve tool, but this time I'll draw a circular area to determine exactly where our cactuses will show. I can select my cactus from my asset library, drag it into the scene and scatter on selection. To limit them to the area I've defined, I need to add this curve as a object mask. There are many different ways we can adjust these parameters. So we could only have cactuses outside the area, only inside the area, only a certain distance from the area, but for now we want them within the area. Now they are in the area, we can adjust the scale and density of the cactus. Here we can see density is actually still too high, so we can adjust the noise mask breakup to further reduce the density again. We can freely move and scale the area within our scene, so we don't have to redraw multiple curves to get our position just right. For other assets that we don't need to scatter, such as this castle wall I've found, we can just drag them into the scene and use some of the helpful dash tools to allow easy positioning within the scene. Scattering some foliage on top of our assets is a great way to help them blend into the scene. I already have some foliage to scatter, which again I will have a link to in the description. So all I need to do here is select my wall, hold Control and drag my object into the scene. With this I can select the scatter on selection again, and now I will have grass scattered across my model. This again brings up a context menu to adjust the density and scale of the grass, but one setting that is useful when scattering on an object is the height mask, which will allow us to scatter above a defined height. Here I am doing the same thing for the other wall, making sure we have an accurate height mask and a nice amount of density for the grass above. I want to add an old well into my scene, again made up of rocks so I can easily adjust the shape and size. To do this I will use a Radial Scatter. So first I add my rock that I'll be using to build the well into my scene, and then I select the Radial Scatter option within the dash toolbar. I can add my mesh into the scatter meshes, and I can also add this mesh as the origin mesh. Adjusting some settings, we can see our rocks have been scattered. There are a few settings we need to change here for our well shape. We want a low ring height with no offsets between the rings. You can make many different shapes with this, and remember a useful tip is to hold Control or Shift while dragging these parameters, and it will adjust the increments they increase by. Now I have my well shape. Just like the walls, we want to make sure we select the random spin option to break up any of the repetition that can be seen. Another option that's really good here is the random remove. It'll randomly remove rocks from the scatter. I feel this wall gives the wall a bit more character and further breaks up any repetition. As we've removed some rocks, I think it would be a good idea to scatter some around the area. We can do this using the physics paint tool to scatter some about. First I select my rock, and I just type paint, and we can see the first option is physics paint selected option. Before we do paint them however, we need to make sure our rock is dynamic and our well is static, so there is some physical interaction between the two. Again, there are many different settings to adjust, so I want to make sure we change the number of painted objects and the radius in which I'm painting them in. But as you can see, that might be too much, so a quick undo and then I can increase the radius and paint again. I can paint with any asset I have. For example, I have some different types of wood here that I'd like to scatter across the scene. I can scatter both of these using the same method if I just select them both. Scattering some wood on this wall uses the same method, I just need to make sure the wall is set to complex so it interacts with the falling debris. Coming back to the path, I want to scatter some objects alongside it. We can go and use a path scatter again on the same path, but this time we're going to scatter some grass across it. After scattering the grass, we can adjust the width so it aligns with the edge of the path, and then we can adjust the other settings such as scale and density to make it look a bit nicer. To celebrate the release of trueSKY 4.4, you can get 55% off a Dash annual license by using the code trueSKY and following the link in the description. This deal will last until the end of May, so get it while you can. We're really excited about trueSKY 4.4 and its future. We have also just released a newsletter with our current roadmap, which will also be linked in the description, so stay tuned for more content. For now, back to the video. Now our scene is set up, we are ready to upgrade the sky with trueSKY. As you can see, the default Unreal clouds do not look great. So once you have installed trueSKY, you can go to Tools, Initialize trueSKY. I'll include a link in the video description to help with installation if you need it. Now this window is new for anyone using a previous version of trueSKY, as this is new with version 4.4. We have now embedded our UI directly into Unreal, which means we have better control over the UI as well as UI support on Linux. Simply enter your username and license key from your Similar account page, press the button, and you're in. We can now close this and initialize again, which will bring up a new screen. Here we have some settings that will remove Unreal Sky systems as they're not needed, so we can leave these as default for now. This is our issues page, letting you know of any bugs we're currently working on. You can select a preset sequence or you can create your own, but we'll be using the preset multi-layer in this scene. You can select the directional light that trueSKY will take control of or leave it blank and we'll create one for you. Now we can hit the initialize key and trueSKY is in the scene. Our setup wizard has created 3 actors, the trueSKY actor, a trueSKY light, as well as a post-process volume. We'll have future videos going into detail on all the settings and parameters of these 3, but for now I'm going to focus on what I consider some of the most important ones on the trueSKY actor. First is the current time. Just input what time of day you want and the sun angle will change accordingly. Our sun, star and moon positions are all geographically accurate in relation to your set position, but we do allow for artistic control in case you want to adjust the different parameters such as 3 gigantic moons or always daytime. When it comes to adjusting the clouds, some of the most important parameters for performance and quality are the cloud window settings. These settings determine the grid on which the clouds lie, so a high resolution means nice looking clouds, and the range is the area the clouds can generate within. If you want your clouds to be 20 kilometers tall, you need to make sure your cloud window will support that by setting it to 20 or more. Another important setting when editing is the interpolation mode. By default we use game time, so if you speed up your game, the clouds would also speed up if they were moving, for example. But when I'm editing I like to use real time, as that means the game does not need to be simulating for changes to take effect. The noise settings are also very useful for breaking up repetition or adjusting the clouds to fit your scene. Be aware that these noise settings, along with other parameters on the trueSKY actor, are global and not specific to the individual layers. Individual settings are on the timeline, which we will get to shortly. We also have settings in the render section. These are usually performance based or visual based, such as the high detail multiplier. That effectively multiplies the number of steps we do within the clouds. So this is obviously a large performance impact but can produce great visuals for your scene. Now we can move on to editing the cloud sequences themselves. To do this we need the trueSKY sequencer and timeline, which is available by going to Window, trueSKY sequencer. You can place that at the bottom of our view, and we will also want the properties window to be able to adjust the different parameters. Now we have both windows open. If we select a keyframe, the properties for that keyframe will show within the properties window. If you make a change, for example to the cloudiness, you may need to adjust your time of day for the change to show. That will be because of the interpolation settings I mentioned earlier. So if you go back to the trueSKY actor, we can set the interpolation mode to real time while we edit. So now if we adjust the cloudiness, we can immediately see the change. There are many other parameters we can adjust, from shape to the noise to the precipitation coming from these clouds. But for now I will again focus on just a few of them. But what we can do is we can add a new cloud layer. You can have as many cloud layers as you like. We add a keyframe at this position. And there's our new layer. We can adjust the cloud base, which is the starting point for the clouds, and the cloud height, which is the height of the clouds themselves. And cloud width is the size of the repeating pattern of the clouds. As you can see, the scale of these clouds is huge, as they are many kilometers up. For this scene, I don't want realism, so I can reduce the overall scale of trueSKY. So I can do this by going to the meters per unit setting in the trueSKY actor. This means the 1 kilometer cloud base will now only be 10 meters up, and this allows us to enter the clouds easily with the camera for a better view. Now if we adjust some of the parameters on our new layer and we bring the cloud layer right down, we will be inside the clouds, which looks great but isn't too helpful for our level. So for this scene I'm going to leave it as it was and delete the extra layer. A feature that always looks great is wind. So for wind in our scene, by default we need to add time progression and some wind speed. These are easy to set up, just adjust the parameters on the trueSKY actor. But be careful, as if your wind is 100 meters per second, but your scene is running at 1 minute per second, you may get some very fast clouds. Cloud shadows are generated automatically based on the angle of the sun, and we have other properties to adjust this, such as the shadow strength and smoothness of the shadow edge. Now we have wind affecting the clouds. We need the wind to now affect the foliage in our scene. This is dependent on the asset used, but almost all Megascan foliage will support wind movement. Click on the foliage in the scene and bring up the dash toolbar, and then we can select the material editor. Here we have a wind section and we can quickly adjust the wind strength, and wind is now affecting our foliage. We can do this now for all of our scattered foliage across the scene. And with that, our scene is complete. I hope you've learned something in this video. Check out the links in the description for everything you need to try this yourself. And don't forget to use code trueSKY to get the Dash plugin at 55% off for a whole year. You can also head to the trueSKY website now to try 4.4 for yourself. Remember, if you owned 4.3, you now own 4.4. So please let us know what you think. Come and join the trueSKY Discord to show off your work. And thanks for watching.